Yap, mulai.
Oke, saya mulai Mina. 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a different perception people have towards European major city and war-torn Middle East city. People believe that war-torn cities are the fault of people in Middle East, that they're responsible for their own doings, and so they don't think the same about Europe, right? People perceive Europe as a territory that is capable enough of carrying order and peace. Thus, any disruption or attack that happens, it is always assumed that it is done by foreign actors. We don't think this is the case today. We think like far-right extremists are as dangerous and even more prominent in European society. But the problem is that we think that public perception hasn't been aware of it. Thus, as government side of the house, we support that media should speculate that the bomber is white and non-Muslim. Two things that I'm going to bring in my speech. Number one, why do we think that it is morally justifiable to speculate? But second of all, why do we think like media should frame particular demographics as the culprit to begin with? First of all, why do we think it is justifiable to speculate? We think that this is the exclusive, the rare case of self-bombing, Mr. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people do, of course, have hatred towards each other, that the fact that they would hurt others. But we think that in the case of like this group of people hate others so much to the point that they want to use bomb to be exploited in public, and they sacrifice themselves, meaning that they have so much hatred to the point that this is becoming a rare case. We also see that this kind of attack is because it is reckless and is attacking the public. We think it is also it is a symptom of social division in society, like where people where people are in deep hatred to the point they sacrifice innocent collateral casualties. We think the implication of this leads a lot of people to feel fearful and worry, and in many cases even a lot of disruption within activities where buildings are closed, where people are told to be cautious and not roam around in public places, and so on. We think in the point where your life is disrupted and due to unidentifiable threats, we think this the gravity of case like this is exactly where media should disclose the potential culprit to begin with. Second of all, the comparative is this: in opposite side of the house, they will also have people that will suspect they will have suspicion towards each other, because we think that like for even without like the disclosure of this, because for decades Muslims have been a part of like overly saturated terrorism related news. Ladies and gentlemen, that it is very hard to disassociate the identity of Muslim from the word terrorist of self-bombing. That's even without media reporting this. Opposite side of the house always assume that it is Muslim already. In our side of the house, like even though people automatically assume that it's Muslim, the difference is that as media, they're challenging the assumption of the people with their speculation. We think like even though the opposite side of the house want to say that there's counter narrative, we think there is no counter narrative that is greater than the force of media to begin with. It is media that creates the public assumption, perception. Thus, we think like the counter narrative should also come from the media to begin with. Thus, we think that's why it should be disclosed. But second of all, why do we think like the media should frame particular demographics as the culprit? We think first of all, we think that if something becomes, you get to believe something because it is repeatedly told to you. That is to say, like this is also why people associate the word terrorism with Muslim, because that is what media has perpetually done. They continuously feed people with news that Muslims are the ones behind terrorist attacks. Then thus this perpetuation creates the belief among people that that every time an attack happens, it is always Muslim. So the problem is that even though like it has been proven that Islamic State is losing its territory and it is decreasing in power, and that their ability to cultivate homegrown jihadists in Europe is no longer effective, and then the fact that attacks launched by Muslims have been statistically decreasing in comparison to far-right extremist attacks, we think that it is not that easy to get rid of the belief from the people that not every terrorist attack is launched by every Muslim. That is why. So why do we think like framing extremists is more important in this case. Firstly, we think that given the media perpetuation about Muslims to begin with, we think that it is the moral imperative of the the moral imperative of the media to own their fault and to help the stigmatizing, to create this stigmatizing news about terrorism that they disassociate from Muslim. But second of all, we think that in the event like this, it will most likely to harm Muslim immigrant communities in Europe because they know people will turn their eyes on them. The worst part is that we think in the event like this, many far-right extremists that have been aggressive in attacking religious and racial minorities will have their tendency overlooked by society because the fact that they're predominantly white, just like the rest of the society, they blend in because the similarity of color does not inflict prejudice, so for people to be suspicious for them. But second of all, we think that exactly because the belief that Muslim is the culprit of any terrorism attack enables this far-right group to escape the accountability of their action and can get away with anything. But second of all, but secondly, we think if any extreme ideology can carry harm as awful as possible, we think it should be noted that far-right extremism is as awful as jihadist movement. We think the media should direct their suspicion upon far-right extremists as great as when they did it to the jihadists. Why is it so? We think that even though media is as profit-oriented as they could be, the most needed element in their job is information. That is why we don't think these Europe-based journalists should fool themselves, right? They have a lot of information. They must have heard a lot of information about the aggressive behaviors of far-right extremists. They know the trends and they hear the hearsays what this group is capable of doing. And also the extensive sources of information that they have to authority. They must also have they must have also reported about recent attacks carried out by these far-right extremists and so on. We think in the case of like this, it is important that the media should also direct the general public attention to this kind of far-right extremists because we think they pose as much harm as the previous one, and that is why we're very proud to propose.
Thank you, PM, for that speech. To open a case for team up, I call LO.
I'm audible?
Yep.
Yay.
Wait, I'm starting my stopwatch. I'm gonna start my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because all the things that government side of the house say in this debate is that they win on principle, and they also think that it will create a healthy discourse on white extremism that currently exists. I'm going to directly engage to all those argumentations and why it's actually better under our side of the house, right? But firstly, let's talk about what is our stance. our stance is that we're going to report as much details as we could, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to report like what are the structural reasons of that structural reasons and going of that terrorism attack, and we're going to scrutinize and holistically doing research on what we could get from that case, ladies and gentlemen. And secondly, we're also going to sharing and informing the threat of terrorism that exists in current status quo, informing that there is currently some cell activities suspicion in Europe, which is the cell itself is containing the Muslim terrorisms in the past, ladies and gentlemen. But we believe that media should be fair in this scenario, right? Media should report what it is based on the empirical proof that they get from the ground, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that media outlet shouldn't artificially create news that are incoherent and non-empiric. And secondly, we don't agree that they will artificially putting the perpetrator on white non-Muslim, because we think that will hamper the current consultancy effort and anti-discrimination effort that we have in current status quo. But further disclaimer, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, is that we under the house, you should concede that we don't know their identity, right? Their body are completely scattered and fragmented into dust that we don't know their identity at all. So secondly, we think that this debate doesn't operate in one cases only, right? But we think that this debate is a policy that will perpetually happen in future cases, ladies and gentlemen. We think that why this is strategically harmful is that because it's going to apply in a future policy that you will always claim that it is white people and you neglect the power of the current rising of the Islamic terrorism that are also rising in current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think that the nature of suicide bombing is that they're always going to repeating themselves, ladies and gentlemen. We think that it's also hard to detect the identity because they are very, very scattered, ladies and gentlemen. But thirdly, you need to notice that we also not suspect that it's Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. You need to notice that we are going to report it empirically, ladies and gentlemen. But we're also going to create discourse on who is who, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that if in the future that it is committed by white people, then we're going to commit that it is a white extremist, ladies and gentlemen, but it's going to be based on the empirical studies. So I'm going to prove you two things in my speech. Firstly, why in principle we think that media should not do this kind of artificial decision, and secondly, why it's going to create better systemic, discourse on systemic cause of terrorism under outside of the house. Firstly, the principle of media. You need to notice that the media code of conduct are three things, right? Firstly, that they shall write and publish and report fairly, accurately, and unbiased, ladies and gentlemen, without touching up anything and dramatize anything, ladies and gentlemen. They should report empirically and report what is holistically happened without covering anything. Secondly, in acts of violence specifically, no media should glorify antisocial conduct, ladies and gentlemen. We think that media shouldn't be biased and supposed to be neutral on giving the information. But thirdly, in covering sensitive issues or dispute, it should based on proper verification and should be presented in a manner of maintaining national harmony, ladies and gentlemen. We think that imposing their hypothesis on certain thing is actually unjustified for the code of conduct of the media in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. But why we think that media should comply to this code of conduct? Because firstly, I think it is their burden, because you take profit from the traffic and the subscription of the public, right? We think it's your responsibility. But secondly, I think they are given a lot of access by the government in current status quo. They are given the protection to report. They are also given the protection to actually go to near the case, ladies and gentlemen. These are the privilege that cost them that because we give them this privilege, they also owe us the information that we deserve. But thirdly, we think that the public rely on this media informations, right? Because we think that the public have no idea whatsoever of what is happening in current status quo, ladies and gentlemen. They swallow it and further think about their stance on it, ladies and gentlemen. That's how media should work, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the public is the most vulnerable actor because they want to know what it is, the truths of what is surrounding them, ladies and gentlemen, the underlying threat in their neighborhood. If it's a threat, we should report that it's a threat, ladies and gentlemen. That worth to be scared of, and no lies and sugar coated and whatsoever, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think that especially in these sensitive issues, it's these people are becoming more important because people are at their most vulnerable moment, ladies and gentlemen. They're literally at risk of dying. So we think that In this condition, they are easily influenced by the media and whatever the media says, ladies and gentlemen. We think that's why valid informations are very, very important in this context, ladies and gentlemen. But further, because what are the public will do under outside of the house is that they will take the informations from the media, ladies and gentlemen, and furtherly discuss and discussing about the structural reasons of that, and also they can make decisions to protect themselves on, for example, decide to move to another place, ladies and gentlemen. These are the further implications that is in the hand of public, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, why going to create more productive discussion under our side of the house? Notice that the government side of the house really underestimate the power that is the power of Muslim terrorism that is currently rising, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly the reason why we should have coverage on it, because we have no idea about the current rising of this, because we always think that white extremism is stronger in current status quo. But let me tell you that in current status quo, terrorism cell in Europe is currently rising, that is mostly populated by Muslim. And secondly, this needs a high level of attention by the government, ladies and gentlemen, because we already have enough mechanism like Terrorism Act whatsoever, but it's only applied when the media reporting what they know, ladies and gentlemen. And thirdly, I think the societal pressure on passing stricter policy will happen under our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. We think that what this will do under our side of the house is that we're going to create a better discussion, ladies and gentlemen. But let's compare what happened in opposition side of the house, right? The discussion that they receive is discussions about white extremism. We think that it's harmful because it kills discussion. Because firstly, that we think that though it's right-wing terrorism, it will never be valued as terrorism, because they will always be seen as lone psychopath. If it's white people, it's always valued as lone psychopath, and it's when it's Muslim, it's called terrorism, ladies and gentlemen. Gov should explain to you why that this prejudice inside the society will not happen under our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. We think that in current status quo, if it's white terrorism, it will easily be neutralized, ladies and gentlemen, and never be called as terrorism and get less coverage by the media itself, because Islamist terrorism receive 4 times more coverage and spill effect than these people. So I think that what happened under their side of the house is that they will receive less attention and make people feel content, because they already think that this terrorist already died, and this is why suicide bombing is relatively easy to be forgotten, ladies and gentlemen. And thirdly, people are very confused, ladies and gentlemen. There are a lot of claims that it is our people that are terrorism organization that claim that it's our people. This is the kind of confusion inside the society that we should clarify. So under our side of the house, we will give them more structural reasons on why, on like what is the reasons behind this terrorism attack, what are the motives and how they operate, and what cells that are currently active, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, under our side of the house, we will create more further progressive policy that systematically attack them, not just their identity, like in current status quo, we just ban mosque and ban hijab, for instance. We will do more, create discussions that is more holistic, for example, like self-protections and other anti-terrorism act that we will pursue. We're proud to oppose this motion.
Audible? Kedengaran nggak?
Yuk, kedengaran.
Oke. Nah, stopwatch kok. Mana stopwatch? Okay. I will start in 3, 2, 1. To respond for the opposition, first they say that their stance is about they want to report as much as detail that they want to, that they will get to the society, so they will declare the attacker empirically, ladies and gentlemen. But they never explain to us how the information that they will provide will be enough to give the best understanding for the society, ladies and gentlemen. My first speaker has told you, since these cases of self-bombing is a rare case, people will never be satisfied and will operate even worse if they never know who is the attacker to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. So this is why we think that it is exactly because these media have more information. They know about the track record of the cases that happen in the European, for example. People expect media to declare the attacker, ladies and gentlemen. Second responses, they never try to engage with our argument about how to prevent assumption, how to prevent the assumption of the society, which always put the Muslim complicit in a self-bombing cases, ladies and gentlemen. We think that it is also engaged to their case about the better discussion that they want to create. We think that it's important to prevent these assumptions, to create a better discussion, who we should avoid and blame for, because my first speaker had already told you that if there is no taker that will be declared, all the blaming will always go to the Muslim as the Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. What will I bring in my argument? First argument, how it will lead to better symmetrical information. Second argument, how it will create a better counter-terrorism policy. First argument, how it will lead to better symmetrical information. Ladies and gentlemen, self-bombing makes people feel afraid. They're afraid for two reasons. They're afraid to be targeted by the other self-bombing attacker. Second, they're afraid that the terrorists will do more aggressive actions. So that is why what people do to deal with terror threat is that people will avoid people who possibly become the terrorists and blaming those possible people or the community. In the current status quo, most self-bombing attackers who have been identified are Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. So this is why it has really big possibility where people will avoid Muslims even worse if media don't declare the terrorist as a non-Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. We aware and agree that media probably has no direct responsibility to Muslims. But under these circumstances, in terms of terrorist action that caused by self-bombing, we think that media have to be fair as much as possible, ladies and gentlemen. Because if they don't try to report this case, for example, it will create a bad prejudice for the Muslims. And it will harm the progressivity of the Muslim community in the European. Because what exactly being different between Muslim in Europe and also the separatists, ladies and gentlemen? We think that even if, for example, the Muslim community is still being oppressed in the current status quo in European, for example, but still they also already have the progressivity where people had already tried to accept them, ladies and gentlemen, and also sorry, that's why we think that even if some of them may be still oppressed, but their action will not be as will not be as aggressive, ladies and gentlemen. The other actor that will be more aggressive is that the separatist movement itself, because the separatists, the difference between the separatist movement, for example, the far right or extreme separatist community in European, for example, they are not being accepted in the society or even from the government, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why the likelihood the people who that we will do those aggressive action is that the separatist movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. And so that's why, in my first argument, the conclusion is that the information will be symmetrical, ladies and gentlemen, because the news will try to point out the most possible actor. Second, it can rise up the current cases of the separatist movement community in Europe, and which probably being shut down in a status quo, for example. Third, it will eliminate the bad guys for Muslims, since they have a really little possibility to be complicit, ladies and gentlemen. Second argument, why it will create a better terrorism, counter-terrorism policy. In the current status quo, my speaker told you that ISIS are getting weaker. Even if they start to get stronger and wake up again, for example, we think that the power will not be that significant influence in Europe, because Europe also has already tried to prevent it by prevent from online regulation, for example, as a platform where this terrorism, where this ISIS try to terror in European, ladies and gentlemen. But in the current war, the current counter-terrorism policy still focus on the external threat that's coming from ISIS, ladies and gentlemen. So what we will do, we will eliminate that focus and shifting this focus into the terrorists that's coming from the separatist movement in European. First layer, why it will be a good policy? Because the counter-terrorism policy will be more focused to track the recent cases. For example, the cases that happened last year where this far-right movement bombing religious public space, for example, synagogue, for example, and we think that it will be a good policy because it will eliminate the past perspective, for example, where we to avoid from the existence of Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the news takes a really important role because they have to highlight the separatists how the separatists, what exactly they do, who they are to subordinate, and what exactly the significant harm that they will do. We think that second layer, the importance of the news that declare the white attacker not a non-Muslim. It will trigger society to demand to the government in order to shut down the European separatists. So, what kind of the shifting that will happen? In terms of, so for example, in a previous where we really check all the passports and also restricted religious activity, for example, it will shift into to check people organization background, for example, or even to limit or supervise the strange activist gathering, for example. We think that it is really important to change and shifting this mechanism because it's to limit their space to be more aggressive, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we think that this argument is really important to prevent the similar cases that opposition of red off to be happen again in a future, ladies and gentlemen. To limit all their movement by declaring them, because all people will aware to limit these people and also to avoid these people. So that is why we're very, very proud to propose this motion. Thank you.
Wait.
Suara apa itu?
Wait, ada jadi apa?
Ada itu HEDS Publication.
Ada jadi. Kenapa nggak bisa aku chat password? Nah bilang tidak ada sih.
Apa lagi?
Agak tajam suaramu ya, coba bisa lagi.
Tes.
Iya, tajam sekali suara menurutku.
Kenapa ya? Begini? Bagus nih?
Iya, better.
Oke, tes. Oke. Wih, mati menjadi stopwatch. Wait. Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, several responses towards the government side of the house. First of all, if they claim that this is a counter narrative that coming from media that wants to cater Muslim as the most vulnerable actor, then here's the flaw of their analysis. First of all, there is no step-by-step analysis on how these news are going to be framed, how this news is going to be presented, and why within this particular strategy of media on how they are going to frame the news towards the society will suddenly think that this Muslim is not the main perpetrator on the suicidal bombing because it is just one case. As Iksan already mentioned to you, that the stereotypes of white bomber is just because of they are lone wolf, and it is not profitable to certain media to just telling them that this particular person has a systematic on an organized crime group that want to engaging and creating this mega plan just to having a suicide bombing in status quo, ladies and gentlemen. But even if you claim that this is the inherent principle of media, this is where government side of the house is wrong. Media should be the one to teach society about the certainty of information, how the concept of literacy should be taught by media, and how if there is no certain information directly obtained by the official, by the government, by the institution like police and law enforcement, then the media doesn't have any right to just throw the inherent the raw informations towards the society. The harm will be explained. But the point is this: if they're going to champion the inherent rules and the inherent usage of media towards the society by saying they're just being benevolent, this is where the government side of the house wrong. This debate should talk about what is the ideal role of media, which is going to be a proper means of education, of information and teaching and educate society and how they should react to media when the information itself it is not given well to the society. But even if it is so, Farid also explained to us that they want also to giving the most exact thing to do. Here's the question lays in. Because the body is scattered and fragmented, you cannot have the certainty of it. No, in your side of the house, you just pinpoint things without fact. Then explain to me why media is okay to do such thing, even if you have such benevolent cause to do. And by the definition and by the conception and by the understanding of the opposition side of the house, it is not acceptable thing to do. Before I'm giving my particular analysis, here's Iksan already proved to you that first of all, as opposition side of the house, reporting something fairly, it is the most important thing to do. And media should not be biased just because you think that it is profitable to you, and it is better for you, and it is important to you to telling the citizens that it is the information that you should provide and you should throw up to the society. But even if there is a context of there's a context of like clarifications that you want to also give to the society, we're going to say to you that the essence of clarifications and the essence of the details of information is still winning in our side, because Iksan already told you that the details will given as much as we could give based on the fact that it exists. But second of all, in the argument of discourse, Iksan already told you that media always confirming the notion that Muslim is the terrorist and will not and then wouldn't blame white people. That's why they call it lone wolf in the case of bombing. I will add to this. Even if in their best scenario, the news is air, their narrative is thrown to the society, the impact is not that big. They don't explain the feasibility of people who are suddenly changing their decision to supporting Muslims, because they are the victims of this particular stereotype. There are thousands and hundreds of years has been implanted to them. I must also extend this by saying my single argument it is, which is why this is inherently goes to harm the most vulnerable actor in this debate, which is the Muslim, because of those particular narrative that exist, and why it is the extension on the effect of disinformation that media gives towards the society, and because the media has not doing their inherent job well. I'm going to divide this in two particular analysis. What happened in current status quo when the information has been thrown up to the society? It will become a discourse. What discourse will be happening? The discourse, it is the discourse that inside of it, the society still affirming the mindset that Muslim is same as is terrorist. How and where this particular discourse will be aired? Two types. The first of all is in social media, when all social media still filled by people or by bigotry that that just want to attacking the most vulnerable actors inside of the society, and saying that no, it is just a single case, the Muslim is the most perpetrator item in this particular context. But the second of all, news will also shaping the discourse that it exists inside of society, and just telling them that the Muslim also is the major contributor towards this act. They were comparing the news between the white people and what Muslims did in the past. Yes, the idea of telling this single bombing is done by the white people, but the news as the profit-oriented, because they see that the rating will be skyrocketing, they will comparing with thousands and thousands of information about what happened with the suicidal bombing in the past and how Muslim is contributed towards every single bombing that is happening towards their particular states, especially in Europe. But what is the future harm? There were the possibility that Muslim became pinpointed because of these issues. This analysis or this proposal made by the government is very, very relying on certain identity being pinpointed if the body is fragmented. What happened if in the future Muslim or the context, it is highly possible to pinpoint the Muslim as the race who is being that done this particular bombing. My conclusion is this: no matter how strategic or how benevolent media trying to shape this particular issues, the Muslim still going to be harmed because of the perception made by the society. But at the second of all, they still cannot prove to you why, in principle, it is okay to just violating the ideal notions of telling what is right just because you're telling the information it is going to be strategically aired in the status quo. Thank you.
Starting 3, 2, 1. So 3 issues I will address in my speech. First, I'm going to address the issue of, is this model right? Secondly, I'm going to talk about the accountability of this information. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the issue of asymmetrical information. Let's go to the first issue, is this model right? So Ops case, on the principle of why this is not model right, only based on the assumptions of media outlets should be fair and should not artificially create evidence. Then what is the difference of media in the South House? What is the difference in the South House where right-wing media will assume that it's an ISIS attack? Okay, we understand it's not fair, but in reality, is media fair? We don't think so, Mr. Madam Speaker. Opposition's case regarding whether or not this moral right is too ideal, and they dismiss that this is urgent, and the reality of media itself is already deviating from fair media coverage, ladies and gentlemen. Comparing to our South House, we brought so many justifications to the table by Kak Dopes and Kak Farid. We told to you, first, media in times of crisis has the responsibility to inform citizens, especially when we talk about suicide bombings, which has its own gravity and because it's a special case. Media has the responsibility to inform people complete information, such as how to be cautious, who to avoid, and they has to inform in order for the government to know what kind of counter-terrorism policies are far more effective to moderate the harm. Since the motion clearly said that no matter how many investigations we would like to conduct, it will not be discovered anyway. Therefore, in special case, in times very urgent, speculations are justified, especially when media, also especially when media in and of itself is being demanded by people to inform them. Speculations is justified because media in and of itself is already full of speculations. It's already full of opinions, ladies and gentlemen. So if oppositions want to question that if we speculate is morally right, we then scrape it out of the debate, because in the South House, media will still have the tendency to opt out from moral compass anyway. But secondly, if Oppo wants to say that by media declaring the attacker as a white, non-Muslim individual might be to some extent racist and creates a certain sort of, then we question, how is it different in the South House? Because even if they don't portray it as a Muslim individual, even if they don't portray it as even if they don't pinpoint a certain identity, the majority in EU will still assume that the attacker is a Muslim individual due to stigmas that for so long entrenched in Europe that associate terrorism with Muslim. So if they want to question this is not more like because there are certain racist stereotypes towards white supremacy, you should scrap this out of debate, because it's not that different in the South House anyway, because it's going to take a long time, because they're going to provide an incomplete information. Then people will still pinpoint it, oh, it's ISIS that attacked us, ladies and gentlemen. But the comparative, why this morally favorable in our South House? Let's recap our case. First, this is why contextualization by my members is important when I told you that in reality right now, most of terrorist attacks occurred in European are not now caused by ISIS or jihadists. If anything, it's mostly caused by the white supremacists, far-right movement, and separatists. Secondly, therefore, as medias with accountable journalists, you have the responsibility to keep up with current precedents regarding terrorist attacks. So as a well-informed citizens, you know for sure that jihadist power is decreasing and the far-right movement of EU is on the rise due to radicalization. Therefore, this is morally favorable because the stigma and speculation that we have created is accountable because it follows suit to the current precedents that happens in Europe. It's not lying towards the reality check in and of itself. This is also the same thing like what's happened in US, for example. If in US, there will be another case where black people shot by an unidentified person, most people will assume that, oh, it's the police that shot him, it's the far-right that shot him, it's the white supremacy that shot him. This is why speculation is very humane and normal. Second issue, accountability and likelihood. Now, opposition said it's not accountable because it's only in the form of speculation and will fabricate evidence. One, we need to prove to you why there's a likelihood, why there's a legit evidence in our house. Let me extend that later. Secondly, okay, assume we speculate, but in the sub-house, media will be less accountable because if they won't suspect anyone, that's going to take a long time, right? Especially when times of crisis, people really need information as much as they can get. That's why they rely on media so much. What's going to happen is that getting evidence will take a long time, information long time, and it's very time sensitive, right? And people will not trust media nowadays because they're being incomplete information. But let's compare, right? Why our side of the house is accountable? Just because the news is only in the form of speculation, that doesn't make it any less accountable. Why? Because the process of media reaching into conclusions, just like what my members have explained to you, it's not as the class as what's to portray. There's a process of getting information from past precedents regarding terrorism and suicide bombings. There's a process of finding connections between possible white people and major European countries in like Germany, Russia, Turkey, etc. So many likelihood that is part by members of why most likely this is something that a white and non-Muslim individuals would do. One, I told you, it's already common consensus that ISIS in Europe has lost its power due to Europe's radicalization to homegrown Europeans. So like most likely, the one with the biggest bargaining power in Europe is not jihadists or ISIS anymore, it's the far-right. Okay, we're still being selective, but let's do a reality check. The Hanau shootings occurred in Germany on February was committed by none other than Tobias Ragen of far-right. For example, like the Basque separatist movement in Spain and the Corsican terrorism that happened in France, all of them committed by non-Muslim individuals. Okay, but even if opposition wants to bring a past precedents caused by ISIS, like the Manchester bombing arena in 2016, the 2017, the 2017 Barcelona attacks, the 2017 London Bridge attack, well, that's pretty much irrelevant because it happened 3 years ago. Right now, it's totally different. Since all of ISIS-based terrorism in EU last occurred on 2007, and the only recent terrorist attacks before this suicide bombing is committed by far-right, this shows that the far-right movement has managed to tamp down the ISIS influence in Europe, and the only one with the bargaining power is the far-right movement. This is very likely for them to commit the bombing because A, to begin with, they're white, they have superior complex, they feel like, oh, I can do anything because someone was so suspicious. B, the current threat of far-right in European Union, ladies and gentlemen. But let's bite the bullet, right? What if A, we're just playing the blame game and it's only speculation? One, this is okay because in the third house, there will still be speculations by the people. Much worse in the third house because they don't have clear information. They cannot inform to the citizens who to avoid, how to be cautious. Most likely, they just inform that these attacks were committed by Muslim individuals. But secondly, it's not like it hasn't done before this one. 2015 Volnovakha bus attack in Ukraine coverage also speculate who was the perpetrator. The 2014 Malaysia airline shutdown in Ukraine coverage also speculate who was the perpetrator. And what does it lead to? It finally managed to inform people of Ukraine who to avoid is how to be cautious, right? Now, what do we prove to you in this class? One, we gave you reasons why this is still accountable. We gave you likelihood, the process of information. We give you speculations why that's the case. We prove to you, even if it's a form of speculation or somewhat conspiracies, it's going to be same in their house. So speculation should not be the tipping point. Last issue, regarding the asymmetrical information. They say that Op might say that information regarding who to avoid in status quo regarding terrorists is doing this fine. It's not only centric to the Muslims, but also to other separatists and far-right movements as well. I have two responses to this. One, this is not true, since all counterterrorism policies and information in EU based on stigma against Muslims. That's why the counterterrorism policies in EU is only like Muslim men and limiting immigration. Secondly, but even if it's true, even if there's fair information, it's not holistic. The narrative information is only small because it has been diluted by narrative and stigmas constructed by the majority of American European against Muslim. If you want to live in a world where information is symmetrical, if you want to live in a world where the information is going to be complete and accountable, therefore you should vote for a government-served house.
Ulit na guys. Wait.
Kalau misalnya live Kak, ter-add record aja. Kalau misalnya saya kasih pindah host. Halo.
Menurutku dia mau dulu eksperimen.
Aduh Kak, apa? Ada rapatku, tapi di Zoom juga. Tuh lah.
Iya, kalah sih mau dulu. Terakhir ini, 7 menit lagi.
Dia udah mau jadi speech Kak Firman, dia takut Kak.
Ih, ya begitu.
Am I audible? Hello. Test. Okay. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to divide my speech into 3 parts. 1 is principle, 2 discrimination, and 3 on solvency of terrorism. 1 is on principle. Governments say 2 things. 1, we need more information, and their policy with that. I think this is very inexclusive. Iksan shows you that in the current status quo, we can actually give people so much information on precedents and so much information, empirical evidence on why right now terrorism cell that exists is actually this, and terrorism evidence that exists in the current status quo is this. So I don't think information is actually that important. But secondly, Farid then say, well, you need the names of this individual. Precisely, we think that the names are the thing that is distorting the individual's ability to calculate on whether or not these kinds of issues is actually needed to be engaged in a meaningful way and can be engaged in a constructive way, in which we think our second argument is exactly about. Lastly, Daffa say that in sensitive conditions, we are able to actually opt into and buy into speculation. This is totally wrong. In the current status quo, especially in cases when it's very sensitive, such as in refugee crisis, such as in economical crisis, we never give speculation because we know that people are going to be influenced heavily by it. But what do? We let experts to actually give information, and we let individuals to actually access information that is actually very credible. We think that precisely their policy that distorts information and distorts the ability for individuals to actually engage to so much information that is important for them to actually be better engaging towards better policies. What did Iksan say? Iksan say to you 3 principles. 1, that is the principles of accurativeness and empirical evidence. Secondly, the principle of antisocial conduct. You should be able to glorify it. And lastly, sensitive conditions. I don't think government are able to negate each principle because they only say that we need information and this is sensitive condition, but they never try to characterize and identify what is the role of media to begin with and what is their role in sensitive conditions and what is the influence of it and how people are unable to buy into certain informations when they're trying to do these kinds of policies. So I think in terms of portrayal, in terms of relevancy, Iksan 1 on principle. 2, discrimination. So government mainly say that discrimination will happen because right now in the status quo, people try to pinpoint Muslims as being terrorism. So absent this policy, people will blame Muslim. I have 2 responses. First, no, I don't think their side will change discrimination significantly because in the current status quo, the vast majority of people who do harmful discrimination, such as microaggressions and harassing Muslims on the streets, are individuals who, to begin with, have unchangeable traits of racism. This might be because of their history with Muslims, because the influx of refugees that was majority Muslim, or their upbringing because of how their parents internalized this in their heads since childhood. So I don't think in government side, these people will change, and I think they are the vast majority of people that exist in the current status quo. Secondly, even if we talk about moderate people, absent government model, these individuals to begin with, even if they internalize some racist rhetorics on Muslims, in most cases, they only actualize that racism in a not harmful way. Such as usually, they just avoid evade going out to complexes that have more Muslims, or simply they just refrain from engaging more at night, or simply they are more cautious when are nearing Muslims. So I don't think, even if in their moderate case, they have the ability to actually be that microaggress or be that extreme in trying to actually do discrimination, because they have their reputation at stake and their job at stake. They don't want to be seen as a blatant racism. So I think that even if in the moderate people, I think there will be no significant change at all in how they try to behave, because to begin with, in the current status quo, it's already that progressive. Moreover, we think that discrimination in government side will be worsened because the white racist majority will become much more aggressive towards Muslims. The reason is they will feel disgusted to be affiliated with the same community that they called terrorists in the past. What will they do? They will do their best to prove that Muslims are bad and paint them in a bad light. What does this look like? First, they will do more microaggressions to incite violence from Muslim community to actually be more mad. Secondly, they will infiltrate the houses of Muslims to seek for supposed evidence of terrorism. Lastly, they will be more active in portraying that the reason why that individual is being reported, this white majority, were only because extremists that is coming from Muslim. So they are going to paint themselves to be the victim and say that this is the fault of the Muslims to begin with. So even if you use their side to actually provoke this white majority, they will be more aggressive and be more microaggress these kinds of vulnerable individuals to begin with. But even if discrimination exists in their side, we think the status quo supporting system exists effective. Two reasons. One, because the rise of progressive movements. In the current status quo, we see the continuous rise of leftist movement that is able to capture the attention of people donating and able to create better rhetorics and why Muslims actually matter. Especially in France, why Muslim strong voting bloc exists in the current status quo. Secondly, notice also most Muslim community in Europe, all the established ethnic enclaves in the current status quo, they have community that they feel belong to and protect each other in the current status quo. So I think there are two reasons why in the current status quo, even discrimination exists, there is solvency for them. But even if in the worst case scenario, discrimination exists, assuming also my multiple analysis why it's very marginal, I think that team opposition are willing to trade this off and let it happen because it's marginal and allow our argument of solvency of terrorism to actually play in and actually benefit in our side. Because the solvency of terrorism is much more important because the looming threat of why this will happen again is actually more probably in government side. Third clash, solvency of terrorism. Farid said that ISIS is weaker. Lopez also said about this. Wrong for three reasons. One, ISIS is still at large in the current status quo. The numbers of bombings that are getting higher in the past year. Europe are the one of the largest contributors of ISIS recruitees. So even if bombings doesn't happen, ISIS recruitees still exist and the ideology still persists. Secondly, the reason why ISIS are able to do this because the nature of Europe, their countries are interconnected. So its surveillance is very hard, especially when you have no borders. You can easily seek shelter in other countries and just hop into other countries when to evade these kinds of Interpol. Lastly, this is also because Europe have no collective police force to counter this. Even if Interpol exists, they suck. I don't believe them. Given that terrorism cells still at large, we think that their policy worsen progress for two reasons. One, this will change their attention. People will change on their focus to only white majority. The response are going to be really simplistic because Haykal say the president's already proven to you, they always name these terrorists as a lone wolf and have no systematic reasons on why they do so. The impact of this, people feel more content on pushing political leverage and not trying to actually push for better terrorist mitigation policies because these lone wolves already died. But secondly, society feel confused. Notice that most terrorists like ISIS, no matter whether or not they do it or not, will claim that attack because their main strategy is to spread terror. This happened several times in Indonesia when lone wolf family bombings were claimed by ISIS, but evidence proves that they have no connection at all. In the comparative, our side have better ability to actually be more rational because we can get better buy-in for experts and rational calculations to be internalized by people and they are not distorted by government policy. Last response coming from God. Far-right movement. Two response. I have never saw far-right movement that bomb individuals, and no anti-refugee movement has ever been as extreme government explain it to be. The fact that Daffa says so many examples of ISIS bombings, but zero examples where bombings that were claimed by far-right shows you how true this is. But lastly, to be more serious, they won't be that extreme because they can do it through a legitimate way, through good representation and good traction. Why would you go extreme if to begin with, anti-refugee laws and protectionist laws is very, very persuasive in Europe? In our side, the principle of media are protected. Secondly, discrimination is not going to be changed in their side, but worsen. Lastly, solvency of terrorism is better in their side. In their side, nothing will change at all. Vote for team opposition. Thank you.